I'm an amateur writer, and if you clicked on this video, I think you are too. Knowing where to start or how to do something is nothing to feel ashamed of. Everyone has to start from somewhere. For me, the concept of my first creative project started all the way back in 3rd grade recess, where I made this comic titled Ghost Cat. It was a story about a pet cat who fell into a pool of experimental acid and became a ghost. Basically, think of Danny Phantom. The story was unserious, messy, and to keep it a B, it was just bad. But there's nothing wrong with being bad at something. Everyone has to start from somewhere, and I believe creating a lore book is one of the first best steps to creating a fictional world. So in today's video, I'll be giving you a rough guide of what I do when creating a lore book. Once again, I'm not a professional, but honestly, I think when it comes to creative work, that's the beauty of it. You don't have to be a professional to make a good story, you just need a little bit of passion and guidance. Though before we get into things, I have to ask you a question. What type of story are you writing? If your story is a simple romance, an episodic comedy series, or a drama series, or literally any genre that has a world that's relatively normal compared to reality, personally, I don't think this guide will be beneficial to you. Though, depending on the level of depth you want in your world, you may actually need a lore book. Lore books should be most commonly used for series that stretch on for a long period of time. Think of One Piece, or typically just any manga or anime. You'll probably need a lore book for that. I know for damn sure I need one, because my lifelong project Hauled Archive has such a complicated lore that most of it isn't even written down yet. So after taking a moment to think if you actually need to write a lore book, let's dive straight into the first steps. Step 0. Open Google Docs. By the way, if you're not planning on writing at this very moment, please skip to this timestamp for the guide. I believe that as a writer, your best beginner-friendly app to write with is Google Docs. Most people should be familiar with using it given that it's used for school. Even then, this is still necessary to explain. I want you, as the viewer, to follow along. Open a new document. I don't know about you guys, but I fucking hate light mode. So what I do in all my documents is make the pages black. To do this, right under the title of the document in the top left, I click File, then go all the way down to Page Setup. Once you see this pop up, you can customize a page color under this drop down. You don't have to choose black, but it's easier on the eyes for sure. Now that your paper is black, please make sure you highlight all the text in your document and make it white with this letter button. This should allow you to see what you're actually typing. Afterwards, what I want you to do is click the plus sign right beside your document tab twice, so you have 3 tabs. You can rename the tabs whatever you want by clicking the 3 dots, but for now, let's rename them to World, Timeline, Factions, and Characters. Factions and Characters is together, by the way. These are the 3 main sections of your lore book. You can rename them later or perhaps add more sections, but this should do for the moment. Step 1. The world. Once again, if your story is taking place on Earth itself, then you won't need this segment. You may need a timeline or notable locations, but if this section doesn't apply to you, then please skip further into the video. So, how do you introduce the world in your lore book? Well, ask yourself this. Who created your world? Are there any canonical gods who forged the Earth, or does the world's existence not have to be questioned at all? Let's take 2 examples. If you watch Naruto, then you know it takes place on Earth. However, it does not have the same geography as our planet. Additionally, we can't cast ninjutsu like the shinobis in their universe, unfortunately. Secondly, in my series, Hauled Archive, the world was created by celestials, higher beings who sought to create a society of humans beneath them. These are 2 distinct worlds. In Naruto, the origins of planet Earth aren't relevant to the events that happen in the story. It's simply the planet where the plot happens. What really matters are the local locations, such as the hidden villages. They exclusively exist in this local geography. So to put it simply, the local villages of Naruto are more important than the existence of the world itself. Now back to my series, in Hauled Archive, the world may have factions or countries around the planet, but ultimately the world itself plays a heavy part in the entire story. It has its own name, origins, and resources that grant the characters powers. This world is vastly different from our reality. For Naruto, all the audience needs to know to understand the story is the existence of the shinobi villages, while in Hauled Archive, you need to learn about the broader world. Now go ahead and take a moment to think about where the majority of your story takes place. If the first thing that comes to your head is local locations, then that's the scope of your world. If 90% of the screen time takes place in a fictional high school with special rules, then that's all you need. But if your story ventures across the planet, you need to explain each section of the world and the continents or countries established on this world. This would also be a good time to write down the power system if your characters have superpowers. When it comes to making a good power system, I'll make a separate video for that one, so make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications when that video comes out. eventually. Step 2. The timeline. Now that you have a present-day image of the world you've created, it's time to work backwards a bit. The timeline is supposed to answer the question, why and how is the world the way it is? What wars happened? What catastrophes occurred? Who became the hero and who died a villain? Who founded what country? How has the political state of the world changed? How has the power system evolved? What technology or techniques have been lost to time? You can get really creative with this, and personally, I think it's one of the most fun parts of writing a lore book. I think this step is quite self-explanatory. I can't give you much guidance when it comes to your creative ideas, but there's one thing I can say. Please, for the love of God, make your timeline cohesive. I'm not saying it should be brain dead simple, I'm saying it should make sense. The dates and the logic of events are the most important details when writing a timeline. To help with this, create specific time eras to make it simpler to digest. For instance, in my series, there was a golden era that lasted over 2,000 years due to the contributions of Nano Velocity, who is also the founder of Perlia. Our main character, Xernos Velocity, lives in this faction in the present day, and due to him being a descendant of Nano Velocity himself, he and his family are considered royal blood. This, in turn, causes Xernos to bear a sense of responsibility for his faction and lineage, directly affecting the events of the story. Not to glaze myself, but this is an example of a timeline making the characters' miles more interesting than being randomly inserted. A cohesive timeline can not only make your world more interesting, but also enhance a character's traits. I mean, have you ever thought about who your ancestors are? It changes your perspective on your past. Step 3. The factions and characters. This is easily the hardest part of creating a lore book, as characters are dynamic set pieces within your world. They make the plot move forward, or perhaps, if they're antagonists, the opposite. What I personally did to simplify this process was first list every faction or group in the world. Then after that, I created subsections. Let's use my series, once again, as an example. The main character, Xernos Velocity, lives in the faction of Perlia. However, in the story, he goes into Perlia's special military program, Pearl Academy. This will make him a citizen of Perlia, however, locally, he is closer to his military classmates. So in Google Docs, what I did to simplify this was in the third tab, I had a list of all the factions in the world. Then on Perlia subtab, I had a summary of Perlia's identity, laws, morals, beliefs, important historical and political figures, men military, civilians, and Pearl Academy students, which is where Xernos' character entry would be placed. But, before you get hasty and write down your character's sad and depressing backstory, you have to realize one important thing that I believe many writers don't understand. Your main character is not the center of the world unless you intentionally say otherwise. I will say in my story that Xernos will and does play a significant factor in the events of the story. Hell, the story is mainly about his journey, and he carries the majority of the plot. However, when you have tunnel vision towards the main character alone, it blue balls your writing. When people read your novel, script, manga, or watch the adaptation, every single one of your audience members is going to have different taste in characters. Yes, the main character is bound to be popular, but when they're the only character that matters and they're constantly being shoved down the audience's throat, some are bound to dislike it, even if they like the main character initially. Remember, characters are supposed to be dynamic. Whether it's to their antagonist, rival, the environment, a friend, or love interest, they need other characters to amplify their entertainment value. I still believe a good character should be able to stand by themselves, but that doesn't give the excuse to ignore or shaft supplementary characters. So in the context of putting Xernos' character entry at the top of the list, we need to be more realistic. The world's lore book you're creating should not put the main character at the forefront of its entries. Remember, lore books are about the world. Your character is not the world. Organize each character in each section alphabetically. Treat every character's entry equally. When you create a strong side cast of characters, your series is infinitely more memorable and worth reading or rewatching. Make sure you mention every single plot relevant character and put them into the corresponding section within the lore document. And yes, I mean every single one. Give them a backstory. It doesn't have to be the most complex, but we just need to understand why they act the way they do. Though, once you get done with your rough draft, it's time to start writing an actual story. When it comes to actually writing a story though, I'll have another video about that, so stay tuned once I get to it. Now that we've gone through all the backbones of creating a lore book, it's time for the tips. Tip 1. The map. The map of your lore book should be placed in your first section, the world. The reason I didn't mention it earlier was that I assume most people wouldn't have an idea of how to create a good looking fictional map. I heard there's some websites for fantasy map creation, though I haven't tried them myself, so I couldn't say I could recommend any. If anyone in the comment section could drop a website name, don't link it so we can try it out, that would be greatly appreciated. Though, If you want to have at least an idea of how your map would look without drawing anything, I would recommend separating your map into 4 or 5 sections or categories. The 4-section structure is northwest, northeast, southwest, and southeast, you know, the fucking hemisphere thing we got going on Earth. However, the 5 structure is the thing I use. I do central, northeast, southwest. If you find that easier, then please use it, but honestly, if your map isn't big to begin with, then I don't recommend you stress about this too much. Like, if your series takes place on 1 continent of land, or hell, even 2 in a condensed unknown location on the globe, then make a smaller local map that only shows the necessary countries to tell your story. Tip 2. Avoid linear timelines. Regarding the creation of your timeline, please make sure that if your world is big, more than one event is happening at a given time. Yeah, one faction might be in a golden age, but another, perhaps there could be a genocide. Also, while your story is taking place in the main plot, don't assume the world is automatically peaceful. If you watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, when Aang woke up, the Fire Nation had already wiped out the monks, which is why he's the last Airbender. So if you want to make your timeline go above and beyond, make sure your world is always moving. Okay, this is gonna get a little bit weird, but we gotta talk about this. Regarding your character's birthday, I'm not saying it has to be mentioned in the story at all unless it's relevant, but make sure the parents of your character aren't on some crazy rabbit timing. So if a character has a younger or older sibling, just make sure like it's possible in a timely manner. Okay, whatever, moving on. Tip 4. Your lore book will be political. Believe it or not, the more fleshed out your timeline is, the more inherently political your lore book will become. I know that sounds uncomfortable, but it's true. If empires fall in your timeline, you need to explain how and why they fall. In real life, we studied the fall of a plethora of empires, from the Greeks to the Romans. Art and creative writing are inherently political. Take Star Wars, for instance. The rebellion is portrayed as heroic, while the Empire is the evil force withholding freedom from the galaxy. This clearly portrays a political message. Don't be uncomfortable expressing yourself, as art is simply a projection of beliefs. For my last tip, this is arguably the most important. Tip 5. Your lore book is not finished until your story is. Authors typically publish their lore book after they have fully conceptualized the plot of their series. Sometimes they don't publish it because it was meant for themselves. The point is, the lore book of your series is simply your assets for the plot you are trying to tell, and whether you want to update, amend, or delete those assets, it's up to you. Though I would go as far as to say, you can ignore this entire guide altogether. Creative writing, for the most part, doesn't have a set of streamlined rules. Creativity doesn't come from following the status quo, it comes from innovation, inspiration, and passion. I know this sounds a little bit cliche, but I think we could all use a little more love in our lives. I think most people would agree that 2025 was one of the worst years of the decade, and 2026 is not looking to be any better with the advancement of AI creeping in to take our jobs. I will admit AI can do good things, like skimming through articles, running calculations, or doing cancer research, but the generative AI features genuinely wreak filth on the human race. Art isn't something meant to be objectified for corporate profit. It was meant to uplift society and expand our way of expression. Dear artists and writers, please hold on to hope. Your job, single-handedly, is keeping the human race sane. And I don't say that to gaslight you, it's genuinely true. Without our favorite TV shows, manga, anime, novels, cartoon shows, and movies, many members of society would have no reason to live, as these creations are the very thing hundreds of millions of people across the globe look forward to as they slave away at a job that barely pays them ends meet. This may be a hot take from me, but I believe if you want to become an artist, now is the best time, as it's more important than ever to share your joy with the world. But what do I know? I'm just some amateur writer after all.